Is there anything better than the look on somebody's face when you've given them a really fantastic gift? The truth is no, there isn't anything better. Is there anything worse than actually shopping for that gift? It's awful. Nobody likes holiday shopping. It's the worst. Well, luckily, Gamebox Monthly has got you covered. Simply go to GameboxMonthly.com, click Give as a Gift, figure out who you want it to go to. It's great for everybody. It's great for the families that you know. It's great for the gamers and the nerds that you know. It's great for old folks, for young folks, for teens, everybody. Not only are you going to be giving them awesome indie tabletop games, but it's a lot more than that. You're giving them the experience. You're giving them the discovery of sitting down with a group of people that they absolutely love and reconnecting and actually spending time with people. You're giving them memories that will last forever. So do that and be the best gift giver this season. Go to www.gameboxmonthly.com and rediscover social. Hello, yes, let's talk about it indeed. Welcome back to another episode of Elaborate. I am extremely happy because I'm sitting down with a gentleman who's my first poach. I poached him from another podcast on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network. He was a guest on the House Show, and I absolutely fell in love with him. He's an incredible musician, the man behind The Holy Dark, whose album Pretty Little Bird is available on iTunes. I'm sitting down with the incredibly charming John Miller. What's going on, John?
Hey, not much, man. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As I alluded to, you were a guest on the House Show.
Correct.
I want to say you're guest episode 10, maybe.
Yes.
For people who don't know what the House Show is, it's another show on the Dragon Wagon Radio Network that I produce, hosted by Zen Zenith, and it is a small, intimate house show performance where artists like yourself sit down with 10 to 20 people in the audience and put on like a small little, it's sort of like MTV Unplugged meets VH1 Storytellers.
Yeah.
With a podcast in the middle where Zen sits and chats with you guys. And you were just so endearing and so transparent, and I enjoyed your conversation so much that I asked you to come back, and you made a point to keep in touch with me, which I appreciate because people don't do that.
Yeah.
And you're back in town touring.
Yes.
So you hit me up, and now you're here, and I thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Follow through is a lovely quality.
It really is. You get into the world. What you put into it is kind of what you get back. So
totally. So I'm a huge music fan, and I love your music.
Thank you.
But I am also, as we were talking a little bit off mic about my personality, I'm sort of an old school curmudgeon.
Sure.
I'm not like, for me, there's like three types of music.
Right.
There's like, rock, alternative, and everything else.
Right. Yeah.
But you have a very specific genre. Is it called Gloom Folk?
Correct. Yes. Gloom Folk.
Could you explain to me like what Gloom Folk, like what makes Gloom Folk different from folk?
Sure. Well, I really liked, there was an interview where I heard Connor Oberst from Bright Eyes talking about folk music in general. And I really liked his definition of folk, where it's basically like any type of music, when you really strip it down just to its bare bones, you start to see songs like fall apart. Where you get like the super mainstream popular radio hits or whatever. And when you strip it down, it's just like the most simple,
there's
basic,
nothing there.
Yeah, there's basically nothing there.
Right.
And with a lot of folk music, it's almost like it was meant to be stripped down.
Right.
They just kind of add these different outfits to it.
Gotcha.
And I've always been drawn to the kind of music where, by and large, I perform solo.
Right.
So that's kind of like musically, that's always been like at least partially a genre that I've kind of attached myself to.
Gotcha.
And then also, just the singer-songwriter.
Right, yeah, because that's the other thing. I consider you a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, exactly. But then Gloom I've just always been really drawn to, like, I get bored very easily when something sounds like a little too happy or.
Oh, interesting.
And I think I'm naturally drawn to writing. I mean, the things that I write about are, I don't know, maybe not like necessarily very depressing, but certainly realistic.
I mean, yeah, no, you're incredibly poetic, yet not without clarity.
Right.
Like when I listen to your lyrics, I think, oh God, that's a beautiful line, but I also know what you're talking about. It's
right,
not,
exactly.
It's not so hidden deep in the the metaphors and the poetic nature of it.
Right, exactly. You know, because like I live up in Portland, and for me, like the gloom is beautiful and it's very real.
Right.
So instead of calling it something like sad folk or like depressing folk,
right,
like gloom folk, it's
gloom,
you it gives you this idea of what you're about to hear, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be this like dreary thing.
Sure.
You know?
Well, you mentioned that you live in Portland currently.
Yes.
Where are you originally from? Because you're not from Portland.
Correct.
You're based out of Portland.
That's right. So I'm based out of Portland right now. I grew up in a little town outside of Santa Cruz, California.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're a California guy.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this tiny little town in the Monterey Bay area called Aromas.
Okay.
And it's this really small town. It's like 2,000 people. There's a gas station and a post office that's like always on the verge of going out of business. It's the weirdest thing.
That is really weird.
And that's pretty much it. And just like some houses and
really,
yeah.
And how long did you live there for? Did you grow up there all through high school?
I grew up there. Like we lived in a nearby town until I was like 2, and then moved to Aromas. But I don't even remember anything.
Right, but
obviously
that's your home.
Yeah, my entire home life up until I was like 18 was Aromas, and then I moved to Santa Cruz and kind of started the first leg of my adventures.
Did you live? You lived with mom and or dad?
Mom and dad, yeah. They're still together. They're not in California, but they sold the family home and moved out to like, the Highlands.
Does that bother you a little bit? Did it hurt when they sold your family home?
It was kind of bittersweet, just because like I'm one of 7.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
I'm one of 7. I have a twin sister, and
really,
yeah. And when up until maybe,
can I ask, where do you fall in the 7?
Oh, I'm the very last.
Oh, you're the baby boy.
I'm the baby boy.
Wow.
Yeah. But like up until, I think I could be wrong on this age, but maybe up until I was like 7 or 8 or something like that. My mom was just a stay-at-home mom, and my dad was, for the most part, he was like a janitor at this like school bus yard.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there wasn't really a lot of income. So.
Right.
By the time we moved down,
also, if you're the 7th, by the time you came around, your parents were fried.
Absolutely,
they were done.
Oh,
yeah.
just
my
totally
mother's. I'm the youngest of 3, just from my mom.
Yeah,
4 including my father's side.
Right.
But still, like by the time I was around, it was just sort of a hands-off environment.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So by the time they were in a position where it's like kids are out of the house. Some of them went to college. That's pretty good.
Right.
It's not bad. And they were able to sell a house in California and leave. And just kind of now they're enjoying their much deserved retirement. Right. So I'm really proud of them. I'm happy for them. And then there's another side that's like, oh man, that I have a lot of good memories there.
Right.
And it's
so for you, for you it's bittersweet because you're happy for your parents.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
See, for me, it's bittersweet as well, but it's for quite a different reasons. It's bittersweet for me because I didn't I had a perfectly fine childhood for the most part. And I think back to the house that I grew up in as like my home. Like, and my mom got rid of it when I was in my early 20s.
Oh.
And by that point, I had kind of hated it.
Right.
Like, you go through that specific age where you start to resent everything and you become the angsty teen and everything is terrible. And, and so you're listening to really music that just lets the world know that you're upset and they owe you,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so like when it got sold, I was sort of like, good riddance, get rid of this fucking house. But
exactly.
But now like whenever I drive past it and other people live there, it's weird. I'm like, no, it's my house.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally strange. Like whether or not you acknowledge it, there is a massive like emotional attachment that you might not realize until it's, physically like you're not allowed to go there anymore.
Right. Exactly. Like I can't just walk into the backyard. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
That's very weird.
And
it's my backyard.
Yeah. Like I would walk back in that backyard, without any hesitation and have strangers staring at me and I'd be like,
oh,
dude,
shit.
What? Right. I smoked my first cigarette back there.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tell me what to do.
It's like, you see that window? I jumped out of that second story window trying to get out of the house in the middle of the night.
Right.
Like, what did you do here?
Yeah, exactly. What have you done?
What's the relationship like with your 6 siblings?
Well, I was actually having a conversation with my sister last week. Yeah, sorry, my twin sister last week on tour, and she came out to a show in the Bay Area.
That's nice.
And we were talking about this. And it was kind of interesting because I had mentioned, we were just kind of talking about the dynamic of the family, and it's like we love each other dearly, but we're not like best friends. And I think that that's a very realistic and it's because it's hard. Like, how are you expected to be super close with just a shitload of siblings and parents?
What is the age break? Like, what's your oldest sibling? How much older than you is the oldest?
My oldest brother would be in his late 40s.
Okay,
he passed away when I was super young.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
No worries. And then my second eldest sister is in her early to mid 40s. I think she's 44.
And you are, if you don't mind me asking.
28.
Okay, so there's a 15-year break.
Yeah.
So that's a long time to,
it's a pretty long
be
time.
having children and to be raising children.
Yeah.
There was always a baby in the house, it seems like.
Pretty much, yeah, by and large. There's always someone too young to be left alone and someone too old to know where they are.
And I would assume that like that sort of environment in my head, I'm picturing like everything is a movie in my head. So I'm picturing like, your mom and your dad and like the 7 kids and the 2 twins at the bottom. And it's like a sitcom in my head. But but like, I would assume that makes for a really tight knit family. Especially if you're saying that there wasn't a lot of money and dad was working as a janitor, at a bus yard. I would assume like it's one of those very tight knit sort of like we're in this together sort of families. Was that kind of the way it was?
I definitely, to a point, yeah. It was also just hard because like there with that many kids and a lot of young individuals kind of starving for that parental attention,
right,
and not really getting it.
Sure.
So there was a lot of like we're in this together, but there was also another healthy dose. Well, that's debatable. A dose of
regular dose.
Yeah, a regular dose of competition. It was kind of hard.
Sure.
And so yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, it all worked out in the end.
Yeah.
So that's good.
You said that your oldest brother died when you were very young.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask why or
how?
Oh
yeah, no, that's totally fine. My brother, he was. I mean, basically, he was a genius. He was a really, really smart character. But couldn't get through college. He could walk into an interview and get like any job he wanted.
Right.
But couldn't, from what I understand of his character, just couldn't really cope with the heavy burden of being alive for the most part.
Oh no.
Yeah, he took his own life when I was
horrible.
super young. I think I was like 5 or 6.
That is a really heavy thing to process at 5 or 6. Was the family honest with you?
Yeah, they were. They were really honest with me, and I don't remember vividly how they told us, but I knew that he had taken his own life, and I had a concept of like what that meant.
Right.
And then I also grew up in a family that like we were. My parents are like pretty like Christian conservatives, like Baptist Christian, and we were always, we were at church every Sunday, Bible study every Wednesday, and that whole thing. And so I remember feeling kind of confused because the community around you is kind of like, oh, he's in a better place. And then some of them
are like, oh no, when you do that to yourself, you don't go to the good place.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it was, I think nobody really understood very well, like how do you explain this to kids?
A child. Yeah.
Yeah, because
I also grew up super Christian. It was that same sort of thing where when and I don't mean to turn this into a theological debate or to insult anybody's religion who's listening, but like I felt like that was the worst possible environment for tragedy.
Absolutely.
Because I would, when faced with stuff like that, now I fortunately didn't have to deal with suicide when I was 5 like you did, so I can't even imagine that level. But just dealing with death at a young age and processing the things that you're told, these very horrible things you're told in church and in Bible class.
Absolutely.
And then being like, well, if that's the reality, then this is terrible. Like, how does God love anybody?
I know. It's really hard because I started asking myself a lot of those questions at way too young of an age, because you have this body of a church who their like sole purpose in life or whatever is to kind of like expand their little culture and support and help one another. Right. But then at the same time, when something like that happens, there's all of a sudden you realize the duality in the church, and you're like, wait a minute, where's how do we?
A lot of hypocritical sentiments happening.
It starts to get weird.
That might be the best description of growing up in the church. One day it starts to get weird. It
starts to get so weird, and at a certain point, like I just had to let it all go.
Right.
I was just carrying around this thing I didn't understand for way too long.
So you're no longer a religious person?
No, I'm not.
When do you think that happened to you?
Oh, I was well, I think I suspected. I mean, I had doubts as early as I could remember.
Right, yeah.
But
I was the same way. Like I was a skeptic child who believed it because I wanted to believe it because my mom believed it so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you don't want to think that your mom is into this thing that you don't think is reality or whatever that may be. And so you sort of hang on to it, and then you for me anyway, I started to like find the truths. I started to be like even when I was at my most skeptic, I was like, oh well, this thing happened, and so this is a sign from God, and so this is what's happening because I'm doubting, and so this is now happening. And you can make that work however you want to make that work.
That's the thing. Yeah, exactly. It's like your own little inner like narrative of how life works is completely subject to how you think it's going to work.
Absolutely.
And so it's no wonder there's oftentimes like a lot of like divide in the church when something like, like your brother kills himself and people don't know how to react. People don't know how to do this or how to do that because it just didn't seem realistic.
Right.
So I had my doubts really early on. And then as a young teenager, it sort of just became like my own little secret. It's just like, I don't think I believe this.
I think as young as like 12, 13, I was just going through the motions.
Yep.
And up until I was 23 years old, I still wore a cross around my neck.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like, and I would, I don't say I wouldn't pray.
Sure.
But I would Hail Mary pray. Like when something was about to happen, I'd be like, oh God, please something. Like I would like Curtis, or what do you call it?
Help me out.
Vanity pray. Yeah. As I used to call it.
Yeah.
But I think I had sort of checked out long before I officially checked out.
I think so. I think I was more like culturally Christian, I guess.
Okay.
Until probably up until I was like able to like drive on my own.
Right.
And then it was just like
so independence essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When it's like, when your friend or something, it's just like, let's get the hell out of here.
Right.
And like go like drink.
And you're like, wait, that's an option.
And we go,
we can get the hell out of here?
Yeah, I can do that.
Let's do that.
And
instead.
just bail and then just have, like long talks, and all of a sudden you start to figure out who you are. And it's a good age.
So getting back to the family a little bit, mom, you said was up until you were a teenager, for the most part, always around. She was. Was it a really kind of matriarchal family because dad was always working, or was it sort of that like, oh, when your father gets home?
They were pretty good at like an even balance.
Gotcha.
Like I think in terms of like power structure or anything like that.
The fear was equal. You
equally
feared both mom and dad.
Oh yeah, no. I saw the wrath from both of them. So it was like, all right, I get it. You guys report to each other. And
were you a good kid?
For the most part, I think so.
She's like, I don't know. You have to ask my parents.
Well, it was always like I think I found out at a young age that being the youngest, you're sort of the last one in line to be like, get your shit together. Right. Don't act like that.
Yeah.
Because everyone else is
they
expected.
Expect more.
Yeah, they expect more from your older siblings to kind of set an example.
Also, you get away with anything. I set my older brother up with so many things that I did that he got blamed for. Yeah, it teaches you to be a little menace sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, I would roughhouse my brother, and then he would roughhouse me back. And I'd cry or something,
course, yeah.
And be like, don't mess with your little brother. He's so much smaller than you.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just like, hell yeah. That's the only way I had like the upper hand in certain situations.
What was it like having a twin as a kid?
Well,
I always ask for that. My mother is a twin. Well,
yeah.
She unfortunately, my aunt passed away recently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's weird. I still feel like she's still a twin. It's a weird thing. Like, I don't know how to say that. Like my mother is a twin, or she was a twin. She's a twin.
She's a twin. Oh,
God,
she is.
Such a weird thing.
As a twin. Yeah, no, like that part would never go away. Because for me, there's also this reality of like, well, I don't know what it's like to not have one, but I would imagine it's pretty similar to having a twin. Because in order to some twins, I would imagine they're just so unbelievably close, and it's just this super special bond. And I definitely have a very unique bond with my twin sister
versus the other siblings.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. We have a different relationship than I have with any other sibling.
And pardon my naivety here.
No worries.
Are you guys fraternal or identical? Can you have identical twins of multiple genders?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so you're fraternal twins.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I think the science is with the identical twins, you're basically like natural born clones of one another.
It's split, like one thing split.
Right. Exactly.
So you have the exact same DNA.
Legitimate. Exactly.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So no. So not identical, but yeah. So. But I think over time too, we've always kind of made sure that there was enough like independence between the two of us. Right.
Yeah. You weren't like, and also I think that just helps a little bit when one's a boy and one's a girl.
Oh, I think so.
Because you're not going to get dressed identical clothing.
Right.
You're not gonna,
right.
My mother to this day will show me photos of her and my Aunt Catherine when they were little.
Yeah.
And they don't know. Like the only thing, apparently the rule was when they took photos, my mother had to stand to the right of my Aunt Kay so that they knew.
Oh.
So it's my mom is always on the left side of a photo or something. I might be backwards, but regardless, you get it. Like
no, absolutely.
And that's the only way. But it didn't. It wasn't 100% foolproof because just sometimes it just didn't happen.
Right.
And so there are some photos where we do that thing of like, wait, and it's because they're always in the same outfit. And of course they were raised in the 50s. And so you're going to wear the same clothes because that's just what happened.
Totally.
Honestly, most of the siblings all had the same clothes on, even if they weren't twins. But
yeah, that's true.
But it's so much harder. So I feel like they really had the exact same identity for a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I think maybe they were in their late teens, early 20s that they really finally were like, oh, we can be two completely different people.
Yeah.
And they weren't always because even in their 60s, they were both very similar people. They wouldn't admit to it, but they were very similar. But I feel like since you guys are, a male and a female, it's probably just a lot easier to have your own identities. Although you're still always the twins.
Of course. Yeah, the way we were treated is always just the twins.
Right.
You're this package deal 100% of the time. But just naturally, there are things very different about the two, between us. And so, so I don't know. I think in that regard, I feel kind of lucky to have a twin of the opposite sex because just that natural divide I think it was really healthy. Yeah. So I don't know. It kind of doesn't always feel like I have a twin, I guess. In that regard.
All of you, you're obviously, I'm sure we're going to get there. You're obviously incredibly musically inclined as a performing musician, incredible songwriter.
Thank you.
Are you the artsy one, or is the family a fairly artistic group?
I think the family is a fairly artistic group. But I'm the only one who's just kind of
made it your
putting
life.
it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've made it a point to really, go after it.
I feel that way too. A lot of people refer to me as the, he's the artist in the family. But the truth of the matter is my brother, who's, a Marine turned police officer, can put pen to paper and make magic. He's an incredible artist. In his youth, he was an incredible drummer. He would sit down, like I was raised with my brother's drum set in the other room, loud all day long. And he would play, he was a big metalhead. So Metallica, Pantera, and like that was difficult drum. And he would get through an entire Metallica album and not miss a single beat at all. Like he was an incredible drummer. Yeah. So I always feel like when people are like, oh, he's the artist in the family, I'm like, I'm just the one who chose to do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, my family they were all like really artistic.
Yeah.
Like one of my older sisters, Emmy, I always remembered like just on a weekend or whatever, you're kind of doing your thing and she's like just in her room, like full volume, just like singing.
Really?
Or like playing the flute.
Oh,
it's
really?
Just so cool. And then one of my other sister's Mary, she's a drummer. She's just incredible. You know, my brother Charlie, he's like naturally he's a good singer, but he's also like we got really good drawer.
Wait, hang on a second. We got singers, we got drummers, we got flautists. You're a guitar player. Was there never a possibility of like a Partridge sort of situation going?
We had family band. We had always joked about that, but also because in Aromas, this super tiny town, eventually. The county that so Aromas is like kind of like a tri-county area.
Okay.
And the county that our house was in, this San Benito County, they eventually built this really shitty little high school.
Okay.
And right at the time when all of us were starting to cycle into high school every like couple of years or so.
Of course, yeah.
And we did not want to go there because it was just so awful. They didn't have a lot to offer. And then over near Monterey, in this town, Castroville, there was another high school, another public high school, and we were allowed to go to a high school outside of our district so long as they had classes offered that your district didn't have. And the high school that had just opened up had no music at all.
Oh, that's
and we grew
terrible.
Up, yeah, that is awful. And we grew up in such a musical family. We had instruments lying around the house and stuff. So it just kind of made sense. So we had to do the music classes all 4 years of high school in order to continue going there.
Right.
And so through all the years of all of us going in and out of high school was just crazier. Because then I'll be in my room, playing trumpet.
Right.
And then
you're a brass player as well. I was a brass player as well. I was lower brass.
I did jazz band and all that stuff. It was so fun. And then I would switch from that to like electric guitar and like turn up.
I was the same way. I was the guy who was like, "Oh, you play electric guitar? Why don't you bring that to jazz band?" I was like, "Oh, awesome!"
You're like, "Oh my god, I can do that!
I could play guitar in jazz band. I could put down my baritone horn."
Right, exactly.
You said you were a musical bunch long before like the high school years. Were mom and dad into music?
Yeah, very much. My mom, she plays a little bit of guitar, but she's also just like, she's a great singer and she just has the ear for it. Like she can just listen to someone and just start harmonizing with them, like totally on the fly, like spot on. She's just very, very natural. And my dad, like up until he started having a family, man, like he probably would have gone on to pursue a career in music. He's a very good, very talented songwriter.
So your family just has the genes.
I think so. Yeah, it must be. Yeah, and he's super musical and he plays guitar and sings and he still does it like every single week for church.
Oh, that church is a great way to
anywhere they move, like he becomes the leader of music. It's just like he's just born to do it.
So what was there collective enjoyed music in the house growing up, or did you guys like hate mom and dad music?
No, we loved mom and dad music.
Were they into cool stuff?
They were to a degree because being like such a little Christian household, there was a lot of like opening up the door. What are you listening to?
Right.
Let me see the lyric books.
Oh, wow.
And it'd be like, and I'll hand them like I'm butchering the name, but like Rammstein or something like that.
I love Rammstein so much. One of my favorite bands.
And I'm just like, oh, look, it's in German.
It's in German. You can't read this.
And then they like go on Google, and I'm like, fuck. And they take that away. I'm like,
just show them the love songs. Like, you smell so good. That's a song. Yeah, don't read so good.
It's so sweet, you know.
It means marry me. Right. He's proposing in this song. Yeah,
he's an interesting guy, but then also like, but aside from kind of like putting that religious filter of like incoming new music, they grew up enjoying like Beatles, the Kinks, Beach Boys. And so we grew up on a lot
that. Nice.
Yeah.
So, and that I think is acceptable music for kids. Like that's the sort of stuff that you can get. My mom, I grew up country western. My mom was all about country western. So I grew up, and so my mother and father met and they were both line dance teachers.
That's amazing.
My dad didn't stick around, but my mom continued doing that in my youth. So in my youth, I was that kid who was way too young to be in a bar with a band playing.
Wow.
So there was this band, I'll never forget them, Six Gun. They were a band on Long Island.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still a thing. They're all probably in their 70s now.
Yeah.
But they were this like country western band, and I was obsessed with them. They had a fiddle player, and they were, and they always sounded great. And they would play, whenever they would play like Friends in Low Places, they were like, Jake, come on up here, and I'd be like on stage with like a child singing like where the whiskey drowns. Yeah, fucking terrible. But in any case, like that was sort of my thing, and so when I discovered what I'm going to call our music, one of my first weeks of being in my church, there was like the downstairs for the young kids, and then there was the main church.
Yeah.
One of my like first weeks of being upstairs in the main church, there was an entire day on Marilyn Manson. And there was, and literally, but that was a sermon, and it was all about how like this devil worshiper is like impulling, and I wasn't even a Marilyn Manson fan,
right? But you're like, I gotta get my hands on this.
No, it wasn't that. It was more so about the like, oh shit, is all of a sudden my mom gonna start caring what I listen to now, and I'm gonna give her credit, she didn't, because I think ultimately, my mom probably knew that regardless of the religious aspect of our relationship, I was still going to be who I was. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
And I wasn't really listening to that sort of stuff. Like at that point, I'm really big into, Pearl Jam, grunge stuff is sort of where my youth was. But that stuff wasn't not there. I mean, I was a big Rob Zombie fan and shit like that. So, but my mother, it was all country western growing up. So I feel like that was where my foundation for music was. I would have much preferred your instance where I was listening to,
Well, I was still sneaking, like I was listening to Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson and, I like had these CDs. I was like hiding them in my room and stuff, like trying to make sure they wouldn't
I didn't have to be
it.
as sneaky as that, all that. But I feel like
I had to be pretty sneaky.
With as many siblings as you had.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you this question.
Okay.
When you're a teenager, when you're going through the music phase or even a preteen, how many siblings are still even at home? Because there's a 15-year difference between you and your older brother who you lost.
I think it was me, my twin, and then brother and sister.
So then there's so that makes it a little bit more digestible.
It was a little more digestible. Right. By the time I was that age, I got to have my own bedroom for the first time in my life, you know? And so I was like, I had like crazy music, and I was just like, oh my God.
Like, this is my space.
The freedom.
I can put you on the wall.
Yeah, hell yeah. Just posters and, like, pictures out of magazines everywhere and just going crazy.
Right.
But it was good.
So at this point then, like what I'm getting at is like it seems like I was going to say the hiding music probably was easy because there was so many kids for them to worry about, but you had a little bit more attention probably at those years because their attention wasn't as spread so thin.
It wasn't, it wasn't spread so thin. And then at that age too, like, again, like I think I was probably the only one who going back to like ideology where I'm like, I don't know if I believe any of this shit.
Right.
And I think a lot of like the symptoms of believing that was starting to surface.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, of course.
So they were keeping an eye on me.
Right. Did were you a condescending kid?
Probably,
because I feel like when I started becoming that, I became really condescending towards people in the church. People would say something that was like, "Oh, well, we'll pray for something," and I'd be like, "Okay, that's good."
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, absolutely. Like I wasn't like necessarily being rude to anyone, but I was definitely not like excited to be a part of whatever was going on. Right. Just
So let me ask you this, just to sort of move on. I love hearing where people come from and kind of hearing the roots. Like, at what point is it in high school that you're like, music is what I'm going to do? Like, I'm assuming you're playing in high school bands and that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
I
think I kind of always knew. Not always knew that it would ever work out, but always knew that it was going to be what I went for. It was the only thing that ever made sense. I've never once thought like,
I envy you.
What am I going to go to college for?
Right.
I've never once ever been like, I want to be a teacher.
Maybe I should be something else.
Right. Exactly. It's always just been like, how I don't know. And from a really young age, I'm glad I kind of had the realistic, like realization of like, it's either going to work or this is going to hurt really bad.
Right.
It's
and honestly, that is my life now. That's the way I apply that rule. Like right now I'm in my mid 30s and I have decided to do the thing that I'm going to do hell or high water. I will only accept success or continuing to try. Right. There is no failure. Right. There's only continuing. Yeah. And also what is even success at this point?
Right, exactly.
But when I was a teenager, I didn't have I was also, music is my background primarily, even though I don't really do much of it anymore. Like I was a singer-songwriter, I was playing in high school bands and I was like the music kid and that was what I was gonna do. But there was this constant thing behind my head of like, oh, maybe you should get into this thing, or maybe there's this. It was, and then when come time for college, I didn't know what, so I just went to like a crappy community college. So it's nice that you had that sort of like direct clear picture, because I feel like that's a rare thing for. I had a guest on recently, Jordan Black, who's an incredible actor, a comedian on the show, and he pulled a quote from Lenny Kravitz, where he was like, "College is for people who don't know what they want to do yet." And I was like, that is fucking brilliant.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's sort of where I was, where I was like, oh, I'm going to go to a crappy community college because I don't know what I want to do yet. So you, through high school, having this clear picture, was college in the cards? Did you think you had to study music, or did you just sort of...
No, not really. I mean, because I did all those band classes all through high school, but I didn't really like them. I never learned how to read music.
Oh,
wow. I faked it the entire time.
Wait, hang on. You went through high school playing trumpet and never learned how to read music.
Correct.
How is that even possible?
So I could hear, like,
I'm going to guess you weren't first chair trumpet. I'm just going to put that out there.
No, I was not. I was not first chair trumpet, but one of my friends who was first chair trumpet, Steve Miller. Thanks, bud.
Steve Miller.
He was fantastic, and he and all the other trumpet players, like, they would basically just, like, I would just learn parts from them, and would just memorize stuff, and would just memorize
the same way that you probably were learning guitar at the time.
Right, exactly. Right. So for me, it was just like, oh, it's music class. I'll just learn the songs. Like, why would I not approach it that way?
What would happen during, like, the first day where they would hand music out? Would you just, like, fake it and not play anything?
Hell yeah. I was just totally
I love this so much.
Faking it so much. And then they'd call me out and be like, God, like, damn it, John, like, I know you can read these parts, play better. And I'm like, yeah, you bet, Mr. Johnson.
You're like, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Would you do that thing
little
where,
rusty.
like, my big thing was there was always like 2 or 3 key signatures that I could never quite lock down.
Sure.
And so I would just write the fingering. I'd write like 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3 over the notes. You know, that way I was just reading fingerings.
That's so smart. I should have done that. No, I totally fucked up.
That way it was just like music by numbers. Because I understood. Right. I mean, I could read music for the most part, but for whatever reason, there was these 2 key signatures that I always had a problem with.
Yeah.
And so I would cheat that. And even in high school, late in high school, Mr. Briley, my band teacher, he would see me doing it. He'd be like, Jake, come on.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, what? I just can't remember whether this is a flat or a sharp. And so I'm going to write the number but I love the idea of you faking it, like puffing your cheeks real big and like not blowing any air out of them.
Absolutely. No, full on. Like,
you're probably like really overacting. And
I was not half-assing it at all. It's like, this has to be legit. He has to think that I'm just crushing it back there.
What would happen because didn't you have to take private? Like, when I was in band, there was band class,
right?
But then there was also like one period where you had lesson, and it was like a one-on, or it was just the lower brass, or for you it would be just the trumpets.
We didn't have a lot of that because the band director, instead of just doing like concert band, he did like concert band, wind symphony, marching. He did like everything with the whole full band and jazz band.
Right.
So there wasn't really enough room.
Gotcha.
In order to do like a class that's just brass.
Interesting.
Which actually would have been incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have had to fake it the whole time.
Because that's how ours worked, where it's like we had band class, which was whatever period band was every year. But then once a week you had a lesson. Yeah. And that lesson was usually during another class. Like I would be like, oh, I'm not going to be in math because I have lesson today.
Yeah.
And you'd go to the band director because for the rest of his day, because it was only one class that band was.
Right.
So for the other 8 periods, he was just doing lessons with with different people.
How funny.
Yeah, I assume that was how all band class worked. But I guess not.
It was weird because at my high school, the band classes started like before school started.
Oh.
And jazz band was the first one.
It was like extracurricular. It was before and after hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, jazz band for us was after hours.
Yeah, because for me, like school started at 8. Jazz band started at 6, and marching band started at 7. And so
we
I'd
did
be there at like 6 a.m.
Yeah, we had early marching band too during festival season as well. Yeah, I was also in marching band, and I loved it. Like that was
fun.
I saw myself being in a college marching band while I was in high school. I was like, oh, I want to continue doing this into college.
That's cool.
Of course, I didn't go to any college that had a marching band, but like I was really big in the lower brass. Like I thought music was my future. In fact, my band director like hooked me up with a friend of his who was a private jazz instructor who I took lessons with, who played on like SNL, and like he was he was like a big session player in New York and stuff like that. And that was what I really thought my future was.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any direction.
Yeah.
Did your parents support? Did they push you towards music because they saw that it was the thing that you excelled at, or was there pushback?
They just, I think when it came to music, my dad has always been really big on just let them do their own thing and let them ask for help if they need it. Okay. And kind of keep music this like your own personal journey type of a thing.
Okay.
Which is weird because then they would censor what you were allowed to listen to.
Right. Yeah. It's a little convoluted, but
yeah, it's, there's a line between like, just let them be free and then like be a parent.
Let them be free, but to make sure they're free within our boundaries.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's not free.
So yeah. And so when it came to all that stuff, they were just pretty easygoing and pretty loose. Right. I think my mom had me do trumpet lessons like very temporarily, but quickly realized I was not about to learn how to. Right. Yeah, I just wasn't interested.
Gotcha.
It's good. So I just couldn't do it.
How did like the college years go? Did you end up going to college?
I ended up going to college for about 6 weeks.
I'm giving you across the couch high five. Boom. Yeah, I was also
a little bit of context.
I was also like 2 semester.
Yeah. I didn't finish the first semester. It was I was going to this little community college.
Same.
I was taking like a simple math class, a simple like English class.
You were trying to get like a liberal arts degree.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were going to get anything. Yeah.
And the only thing that I was taking that I had any interest in was popular songwriting theory.
Okay.
And I didn't know like what level of songwriting it was going to be, so I was just kind of unsure. But I went in and I think it was kind of all across the board. And basically the only projects or homework you ever had was for like writing songs and presenting them to class.
Nice.
So for me, it was just kind of like this opportunity to work on songwriting and just play in front of a built-in audience.
That's great.
And
yeah. Did you, when you left college after 6 weeks, were your parents like, yeah, we expected that? Or was there a fight?
Well, no, oh no. So I told them I finished my first semester.
Oh, you went like weeks lying to them.
Oh yeah. So
just getting up in the morning, being like, going to college, and
right, just see you later.
Going to hang out at Dunkin' Donuts or wherever.
Right. I would just go out to the beach and just hang out.
Right. Oh yeah,
Santa
we're from
Cruz.
very different places. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh, see, goodbye. Just leave and go do my thing. But just after
they were like, don't you have books? And you're like, nope, no books anymore.
No. They're just like, what? It's the other direction. No, I'm going. Don't worry about it.
Different route.
Yeah, different route.
I'm meeting some friends before class.
Yeah, exactly. Study group. Extra credit and. But no, it just kind of never. It just never came up in conversation. Wow. It was just. I assumed they were probably like, yeah, he wasn't gonna go back. So yeah, I think
which is kind of great.
Kind of new. Yeah,
that's better
absolutely.
than the inverse of the like, I can't believe you're not going and this
right,
and
exactly.
That. Yeah.
Well, because neither one of my parents have a college degree, and so for them, they were just kind of thinking like, yeah, most of the kids are doing something,
which is interesting because you would think that if they didn't have a college degree that they would be pushing that in their kids.
Right, exactly.
Because they were probably like, oh, I never went to college and you guys should have everything I didn't. Like,
yeah. It's weird. They're like these kind of uptight Christian conservative types, but deep down inside.
It sounds like they're sort of like hippies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're kind of hippies. Yeah. And they're it's just like, oh, well, if you don't want to go, that's your choice.
Right.
And it's just like, okay.
Yeah, they're an enigmatic couple, it sounds like.
Yeah, but then once you step on like Christian soil, all of a sudden, how
then the colors come.
Everything changes.
Right.
It's like, well, no, you have to do this. And it's like, well, where was that structure 5 seconds ago?
Yeah,
we were talking about education.
It's like, wait, the church conversation is way different when we were in my bedroom. Right. Yeah. But that's not to make. I don't want to keep bashing on Christianity, but that's part of the problem with Christianity. It's all facade. A lot of it is facade.
I think so.
And when it comes to interpersonal values, I always tell people this, like, every super conservative Christian is anti-gay until they have a gay member of the family.
And then sometimes still
but
anti-gay.
And of course I know that is offensive to anybody who's outed them or who has come out and then been rejected by their family, but I would say for the most part, do you know what I mean?
When
like the larger percentage is like, everybody, every woman is, every Christian woman is pro-life until she gets pregnant and doesn't want to have a child.
Right, and realizes like, oh my gosh, I should have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's that thing of like, until it affects you. And so like, I feel like with Christianity, there's a lot of things that you learn in the church. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of things that my mother learned in the church. And then when she got home and she was dealing with her son, She
Right.
realized, I mean, we went to a very strict, like I was not supposed to be hanging out with anybody that was outside of my church.
Right.
Other members of my family would say that my mom was taking me to a cult. And in retrospect, it sounds like that. It was just Christian, but it was like, you were not allowed to hang out with people that outside of the church because they weren't on the narrow path.
Absolutely.
And so there was only one kid in my entire church that was my age. And he was a fine kid, but we didn't have anything in common.
No.
And I remember my mom never once was like, oh, you can't hang out with people from school anymore.
Right.
Because even though they preached that in church and I heard it in church over and over and over again, when I got home, my mom was never going to make me do that.
Right.
And I feel like it's that sort of thing where like what happens in the doors of the church where, okay, this is what we all think, what we're all agreeing to. And then you get home, it's like, this is what my family does.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. There was a moment at the church, the little church in Aromas, where the pastor at the time had this whole sermon about how a woman's place is in the home. And we got home from church.
And your mom.
And both my mom and dad like told us, they're like, sometimes we're not going to agree with what they say, and that's okay too. Right,
Kudos
exactly.
to your parents.
Yeah, no, super cool. Like I think back on that and I'm like, wow, hell yeah.
That's great.
For all the moments where I'm like, oh, come on, you chose God over me or something like that, I think back on little things like that. And I'm like, that's important though. That's good.
Yeah, that's great. And that's also a great relationship with religion. Like as somebody who's not religious, I find that the people that have a relationship with religion that isn't dictated on everything that is in this form is law is very healthy.
Right.
Like
exactly.
I'll take religion with shades of gray over religion black and white any day of the week.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's been fantastic getting to kind of hear some of where you come from.
Sure.
But I do want to jump a little bit ahead to you performing, to you deciding that you're going to start doing this on your own. And also only because when you sat down with Zen for the house show, I really urge everybody to go back and listen to that. It was a really great interview. God, your music is so good and you sounded so great that day. Not that you don't sound great every day, but there's something about that just super intimate setting. It was just the songs are, I need more of your music because those are the songs that I listen to and I don't, I need more than that now.
Thank you.
But you did touch upon sort of being very public nowadays with anxiety and depression.
Yes.
And that's a large part of your music and sort of who you are. And to sort of tie that into what we have been talking about, like, was that a thing that you experienced as a kid or that you understood as a kid? When did this sort of manifest itself as like, oh, I think that I associate myself with a mental illness?
Right. This has been like a part of my life, basically my entire life.
Okay.
So I mentioned earlier the passing of my oldest brother when I was very young. I also kind of like my first best friend in like preschool, kindergarten, first grade area, who was also had a twin sister.
Oh,
so
wow.
the two parents were like, they gotta be friends. And there was this crazy random thing where the boy, he had like amnesia caused by disruption of like spinal fluids to the brain or whatever. God. And I can't fully remember the whole story, but super suddenly, just in the blink of an eye,
my God,
he passed away. And that was like a really
at
crazy.
What age?
I think I was in first grade.
Oh my goodness!
And
you're like
this was
5, 6, maybe.
Yeah, so I think this was either
pretty close to your brother. It seems
exactly. And so I don't remember this, but like years later, I think when I was like 17 or 18, I like learned that I had been homeschooled for like a year because I couldn't like leave home.
Interesting.
Without like just being so overwhelmed with anxiety that I would just break down and start crying. I just could not function.
So that this manifests itself really young.
Really, yes.
And it might have been a triggered thing because of the trauma.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's just, I mean, creating that kind of a coping mechanism like changes your brain chemistry. And at a time when my brain, it had never been larger.
Formative. Incredibly formative.
It was just I was just a little kid, And so I think it had always really stuck with me and it was just kind of always a challenge. And I would do like I forget what they call it, but it's almost like this like artistic type of therapy.
Yeah, it's called art therapy.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
art therapy.
Yeah. Art therapy.
Yeah, and they have you paint pictures and do stuff like that. And there was like my mom showed me this weird like little watercolor painting I did when I was in like second grade. That was just like a tombstone with my name on it.
Oh my God, John.
Like how crazy like it's just so wild. And she showed me when I was like almost 20. And to me, this was something in my memory I'd never seen this before.
Right.
You know?
Of course, yeah.
But trauma has a way of doing that. It has a way of like erasing itself in order to try to, cope, make things feel better.
Blocks,
yeah, exactly. So
I have a really terrible memory.
Yeah.
There are certain things from my childhood I can remember very vividly, but there are giant leaps of black. Okay. Yeah. And one of my best friends, listeners of the show are very familiar with, his name is Paul Bianchi. He's an incredible writer and a sketch comedian, improviser, but he has an insane memory. Yeah. I mean, he can remember every single teacher that he's ever had. I can't remember any teachers' names at all. I remember like one or two.
Yeah.
He remembers every teacher. And then when he started shifting grades, he can remember every single grade. Like, oh, in the first year that I had periods, I had first period was this, second period was this. He remembers everything. And he's told me that he believes the reason for my memory and reason for those chunks are because he thinks that there was a trauma of some sort that my brain has decided to cover in black or whatever.
Yeah.
And I could totally, hearing you say this makes me maybe think he might be right.
It could be.
Because if you're saying that I don't even remember being homeschooled for a year.
Right, exactly.
That's a big
I
would
chunk.
remember. I think I would remember, but maybe not.
Right. Like I would have thought I would too.
For an entire year not going to school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was super strange. And like at the by the time I like learned about that, my mom was working and then I was out of high school and stuff, and I happened to be working a job for a school district in the same office or in the same building that my mom was working in. Okay. So sometimes we would like go grab lunch together. You know? And she was like talking about that. And I was like,
wait, what do you Yeah.
And I got home from work that day and she like pulled out this old box and she's like, oh, here's all the stuff you made in art therapy. And was just looking at this stuff like, oh my gosh, that's so wild.
Do those things still exist? Does she still have them? Do you still have them somewhere?
I think she has them somewhere because they sold the house in California and moved away. And I couldn't imagine she would get rid of them.
I'm just going to put this out there. Like, if you want a great liner note section for your next album art.
Oh my gosh.
Just be include your childhood art therapy and liner notes.
Fuck.
Just
It'd
like
be so funny.
If you want some super emo kid stuff.
Oh
like,
yeah. They'd be like, dude, this guy is
the tombstone with your name on it is, and I don't mean to be laughing. No,
of course.
Kind of hilariously sad.
It's totally hilarious. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I have this tattoo.
It's also the way that you're, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have this tattoo on my arm of these trees with these faces on it.
Yeah, I see.
And that was like the first like art piece that or the earliest art piece that I can remember making.
Oh, interesting.
And it was not part of art therapy.
But it was just a thing.
It was like the first like art class with other students that I got into when they were first putting me back into school. And I did this weird thing with these trees and these faces. And I found that years later. And
right.
it was like,
and you're like, this is cool. I like this.
Yeah, I was like, I want this on my body.
That's awesome. Yeah. So like, if it manifested itself that young in you, I'm speaking of just about sort of this anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put a year on this.
Sure.
It's probably late 80s, early 90s, or mid 90s even.
Mid 90s.
Mid 90s. At mid 90s, I don't know that like medicating your children is at its prevalence. I think that really sort of happened sort of more than the late 90s is when that sort of became a thing. When everybody
absolutely.
All of a sudden Ritalin became a big thing and all these things. So was there ever a conversation of like, oh, maybe no? So that was
my
not in the
folks
cards.
were when I was still how old was I? I think I was 17, and I'd gone to like without telling my parents. I kind of hit a point, like just before I was like a legal adult. Yeah. I was like going through. I think a lot of like what was kind of blacked out of my brain was starting to like I was really starting to lash out and trying to find outlets to feel better, you know? And I was like smoking cigarettes, I was drinking, I was experimenting with stuff. And then I was just kind of at this weird point or whatever. And Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second.
No. You were just talking about sort of like you had this realization when you were this age that you started lashing out the most.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's right.
And so I, without telling my parents, I went to a doctor because I was just like, well, they want me to talk to a pastor, and that's not going to help me because I think there's a physiological. At this point, I think there's a physiological problem. I think my brain doesn't know how.
It's science.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like the synapses in my brain or whatever is not functioning properly. Like I cannot. I got to do something.
Where did you go? Was it like a free clinic? Like I'm curious the details of that.
So I went. I didn't know how it would all work. So I just went to a doctor's office that I know I'd been to before, and they had me on file. Right. And they let me in. They had me talk to a doctor, and this doctor was like,
"And you're over 18 at this point?"
No.
Oh.
So I was 17. I'm pretty sure I was 17. And actually, no. I think I must have been over 18 because the doctor asked me if I felt comfortable trying antidepressants, and I told her yes, and they prescribed me antidepressants without needing parental yeah, and so without getting permission or anything. But I was on my parents' plan, and so the insurance company notified them of the new prescription.
Shit.
Yeah, so then they approached me and were just like,
"What is this about?"
Right, but I'm not going to tell them like whether or not their decision was right or wrong. They were just, they're just trying to be parents the best they can or whatever. But basically they're just like, we went ahead and basically like blocked the prescription, where it's just like on our insurance policy, you don't have access to medication for mental health, which in my opinion is a terrible idea.
Yeah, no, that's.
But if you genuinely do not believe in medication for your brain, then I guess that's how you do it.
Right.
So, but they didn't take the bottle away from me. They let me hold on to it.
What you had currently, you just couldn't get any more.
Right, exactly. But and that was Lexapro. And at that time too, I mean, even now, like, it takes weeks for that stuff to really kick in. And so I just
it has to become regimen.
Right, exactly.
So you never even really got to experience whether that was helpful.
No. I'd only just started it. And when you just start antidepressants, common side effects when your body's like acclimating and getting used to it is like stomach aches and like weird appetite and this and that,
you're a little off, nausea,
right, exactly. So for like a week or whatever until all that ended, I was just like feeling sick and terrible, and then they took away that opportunity for it to make me feel better, and then I was just feeling sick.
Right.
And it was, it was
so
a really bad
you got
feeling.
all the side effects, none of the effects.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it honestly wasn't until like about a year ago that I talked to a doctor again, because I kind of hung up the towel at that point. Right. I was like, well, they're never going to let me do anything.
If you're not going to get support from parents, it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I left. Within a year from that incident, I was out of the house, and I was just like not doing this. And I didn't have any health insurance, and it wasn't required to have it back then too. Right. So I had no access to medication for mental health. So instead, I was doing what anybody my age was doing.
Self-medicated.
Hell yeah.
Right.
I was drinking, I was smoking, I was doing drugs, I was doing whatever I could get my hands on and take the pain away and be like, oh wow, this is nice. This was really good.
Yeah, because it feels better, not nice necessarily.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
Depends.
Fair. Yeah, absolutely. But I still like, I was holding a full-time job. I was paying my own rent for a bedroom in a house off Craigslist with strangers who became some of my best friends. And, I was trying my best to function as an adult, but it just became like early on, it kind of felt like, well, I'm just never going to have the privilege to like have, like medication for my brain.
Right. And at this point you're playing music on your own still?
Yeah.
Or with a band?
I was with the band all through high school and then a couple years after. And then by the time I was in Santa Cruz full time, the band was pretty much no more. We were going our own separate ways, and I was focusing on putting out my first solo album.
And did you at that point start noticing one affecting the other? Did you start noticing if music was affecting your mental health or if the mental health was affecting your music?
I started noticing that definitely both. So I was noticing, because when I was in the band, I was kind of like dual frontman with the other guitar singer.
Okay. So it was more like a duo. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit in the beginning, and so I was kind of dabbling with lyrics and stuff, but like I didn't really get a firm opportunity until I was just completely writing my own material. Right. So once that happened and I was putting out my first record, and and there's like one of the first songs I wrote for my first solo record. The end of the chorus just says, "I'm just the piece of shit that nobody will know," and it was I would kind of like step back from that, like, well, that's kind of dark.
Wow, I wrote that about myself.
Right,
yeah.
but I was kind of like, but that's not just like some bubblegum poppy thing or like what I was doing last weekend or whatever. Right. And it just felt real, and I was like, "Hey, I think I'm onto something."
And that's like you hit the nail on the head about it feeling real. Like I've always struggled with that. I mean, I don't really put music out there of my own anymore. The goal was by this year to finish my current collection of songs, and that didn't happen, unfortunately. And we have only a month left of the year. But in any case, like when I'm writing, I struggle with feeling like my lyrics are not poetic enough.
Sure.
But one thing I've accepted is that as long as I feel like my lyrics are honest, that's all I could care about.
Absolutely.
And at times they're incredibly self-deprecating, and at times they're deprecating of another person or whatever it is I'm feeling in that moment. But I feel like as long as you feel like whatever you're putting out there is true to who you are,
right,
regardless of whether or not it seems fucked up or it seems whatever, it's healthy. It's that whole thing of like, because if not, then you're just doing that thing where you're sweeping under the rug. You're doing what we've talked about earlier, where you're doing that sort of like,
like I hear a lot of musicians who are like, oh, music is my therapy.
Yeah.
And for some of them, like and I'm not trying to say that anyone saying that is disingenuous in any way whatsoever, but there's just different definitions of what therapy is. Like for some people who like they're only playing an instrument, they're not singing, and they're just like and that explosion of energy, and it feels so good.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, absolutely, that is your self therapy. And for me, I think it was like early on, it got to a point where it was like literally by every true definition therapy. I am standing in front of people. And that's like the only real talk I'm ever having in my life is when I'm sitting behind a microphone with a guitar, just telling people like, hey, if I'm dead next year, like, why.
Right.
You know?
And it's one-sided.
Absolutely.
Which is, I always feel like people, it's funny that you say that. People are like, oh, music is my therapy, because I also correct people sometimes when they say that. I'm like, is it your therapy or is it your exercise?
Yes.
Because I feel like sometimes it's more about the exercise. Because
right.
when I'm stressed out and I go and I hit the punching bag, I hit a heavy bag for a little while, I feel better. That's not therapy. Because I'm still dealing with what I'm dealing with, but it felt good to get something out. It's exercise.
Right.
Music sometimes can be incredible exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like you have you're to capacity and you need to release the steam or whatever, whatever sort of metaphor you'd like to use.
Sure.
It's about that one-sided direction, which is really incredibly helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's interesting.
I feel the therapy in music comes when you do that, when you get up on stage and you one-sidedly hit me with that.
Right.
But then after the show, I walk up to you and I say, I was brought to tears by those lyrics, or
absolutely,
I felt something in this moment. There was a song even that you performed at the house show that I remember I got really emotional about.
Yeah. And
now I wish that I could remember which of it was one of the first three. And I remember I was just like, oh shit, this song is so me right now.
Yeah.
But in any case, I think that's where the therapy comes in.
Yes.
The therapy comes in the healing.
Yeah.
After the output.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because that's even like, so the last time I was on tour and I came here for the house show Zen, and I was explaining how like for the better part of the last like decade, I've just kind of been like a closet musician and haven't really toured a whole lot, because I think I wanted music to be therapeutic, but kind of using your analogy, I think it was just much more of an exercise.
Right.
And I didn't have the courage to kind of like put myself in a situation to see if it could be therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
And just this last year, like going on the road and really hitting it hard with a new record and stuff, and like it was like almost every single show, someone would come up and would talk to me about something. It'd be like, wow, like, either a part in the song or a part in just when I was talking in between songs. So they're like, yeah, like no one talks about that. And I certainly feel that way. I think everybody does, but no one talks about that.
Right,
and I'm like, wow, yes, thank you. Let's talk about this right now.
Right.
And and it's super helpful, and it's I don't know, it's been really motivating and inspiring.
So what now are you doing that helps you cope with, that's not musical related?
Right.
That you're doing that's helping you cope with the depression and the anxiety?
So I do take medication, which is...
so you are back on some sort of medication.
Yes, so I am back on medication. For I know for some people it's kind of hit or miss. I know it's really hard to find. I mean, your brain is so complex, and to find the right kind of medication can take a very long time of trial and error.
Talk about that.
It's really hard, and honestly, I don't know how else to explain it other than I was probably excruciatingly detailed in explaining what my issues were to a doctor.
Right.
And over a certain amount of time, like they're like, I think this might work out, and they really nailed it.
And I think that's like, that speaks to your music as well, because that is also like, you probably have a really great sense of self-awareness.
I think so, yeah.
Like if you can see what your problems are,
right,
it's so much easier to then do something to fix those problems, whether it's explain it to a doctor to get medication for it. Yeah. Whereas like, that's an issue that I've had. And I have lived, which is one of the reasons why I kind of love talking to you. One of the reasons I want to talk to you more about this, because you were so transparent about it, is I've lived with a really sort of deep-seated depression that when we started this conversation, I talked to you about the type of music you have.
Right.
And the reason why I sort of brought that up, and now I'm going to try to put a little bow full circle on this.
Cool.
Is the best way that I could describe my depression is the word gloom.
Yeah.
It's this general sense of gloom, where nothing is wrong. Right. I'm not like, I will wake up in the morning and I will be in a good mood.
Right.
But throughout the course of the day, there's this feeling in my chest.
Yeah.
There's this, and I feel like, the fucking, I don't know if you've watched Stranger Things, but I feel like Will.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like the freaking smoke
Shadow
monster thing. Yeah. I feel like it's just behind me.
Right.
And that is something that I have felt that way since I was probably 18 or 19 years old.
Right.
Now I've lived my entire life straight edge. I don't even drink alcohol. I take like Advil and shit like that. And if I have a really bad cold, maybe I'll take some NyQuil to go to sleep. But for the most part, like I have lived in fear of medication.
Right.
And a lot of it is because I hear these stories about like, listen, there's a lot to this and there's a lot of trial and error. And if I'm being totally transparent in this instance, I'm just really afraid. Like I'm legitimately afraid.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
The question is that fear worse than the fucking gloom? Because I don't know how to describe it any other way other than like, even when everything is going great, even when I'm at my best, or I always say that like some of my favorite moments in life are when, I feel like I'm at the pinnacle of a thing I've worked on. So for example, I'm an independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm at a screening of the feature film that I just most recently made, and it's over and people are there and they've got to experience it, and like it's that sort of euphoria, the same way that I felt when I was a musical performer right after a show.
Yeah.
Right after the show, where you're like, I did it. I've been working all of this time. And even if it's just a small show for a bar of 10 people, like I've worked all this time for this moment.
Right.
And I put that moment out there, and now that's just the way it is. It's just out there.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that moment, even when I'm at my utmost happy, it's still there.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think I have a problem, because it's not there. The gloom never subsides.
Right. Exactly.
I appreciate you being sort of transparent about this sort of stuff, because it helps people like me who are sort of, I would say that I'm fairly new to the acceptance of mental illness.
Yeah, it takes a long time. Like I'm a firm believer that, it's kind of your own journey, and there's no real easy way of doing it. Like, I'll use myself as an example. One of the things I talked about when I was recently talking to a doctor again, when I was considering the option of going back on medication, was I was telling them like my depression, my anxiety, my gloom, is just kind of like my entire psychological and emotional existence is kind of like walking through this fog.
Wow.
And anytime, and when people are like, all the voices of people telling you like, do this to be happy, do this to have a sense of fulfillment in life or whatever, I can just kind of hear them like kind of echoing, but I don't know where to go. There's no, because when you have that and like you wake up every morning, and like another thing I compared it to is like kind of like when you go through like a really bad breakup or something like that, and it almost feels like you used to have a limb right here and someone cut it off.
Sticking out of your chest, he's pointing. And
it's just not there anymore, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Like the same kind of feeling, but instead of like an exterior, like a limb growing that's no longer there, it would be like an internal organ missing.
Right.
And there's just like, you're not functioning well,
Right,
you know? And it's really, really hard. And it was just like, I don't want something that's just going to like make me happy.
Right.
I want to
Because that's not how it works.
Exactly.
You can't, it's not.
Right.
You can't, it's not something that is fixed.
Yeah.
It's a thing that is treated. There's a difference.
Right, exactly. Exactly. It's not a cure or whatever.
Right, exactly.
You know?
And that's something that is really hard for a lot of people to deal with. And have you done therapy, proper therapy?
Yeah, I have done proper therapy. It is something that I'm interested in doing again because I do think, especially when you're on medication, it is healthy to speak to a professional on a regular basis and kind of get them an idea
gauge.
Of what's going on.
It's almost sort of like a checkup in a sense. Sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And even if it's just for safety.
Right.
You know?
I haven't gone in a little while now, but and much like you, I'm looking to get back into it. But I definitely feel like the next step of medication just was never, for whatever reason, it was just never. Again, it might be the fear thing. I think I'm realizing a lot of it during this conversation. It might just be that fear of the figuring out.
Right. Well, I think I had that for years. Like, why is it that I tried when I was 18 and then I didn't try again for almost 10 more years?
After not even really getting in to do it once. Like, after not even trying.
Yeah. And obviously I was seeking medication elsewhere.
Do you think, let me ask you this question,
Sure.
and this might be a hard thing to sort of put yourself back in the place of and answer honestly, but do you think that maybe a part of you was sort of glad when your parents shut that down because you were sort of like, okay, well, this decision was made for me? Or were you sort of headstrong? Yeah.
I think I was a little headstrong in my like, I don't like that you did that.
Right.
And just kind of went on to do something else.
Right.
Like whether
which is weird because you would think if you were headstrong, then you would have done everything you can to get it anyway.
Well, right, exactly.
Right, yeah.
So I guess maybe a better way to answer it would be like, I think I was going to medicate myself one way or another.
Right.
And if it wasn't
Gotcha.
antidepressants, it would be everything else I was doing.
Right. It would be
if it wasn't for everything else I was doing, and I have no interest in doing it again.
Right.
But if I didn't go out of my way to get drugs in order to try to feel better somehow, I probably would be dead by now.
Wow.
I just don't think I would have had it in me.
You don't hear a lot of stories about how drugs saves people's lives.
You really don't. No, you really don't. And in no way do I want to like encourage anyone to like.
So I shouldn't name this episode "Drugs Saves Lives."
No,
I shouldn't do that.
Not.
Okay.
I think I'm very fortunate to not have gone over the deep end. Yeah. I think I was searching for a very specific outcome. I do believe to some extent I achieved it. And then I made a specific choice to not do them again. And I walked away.
Let me tell you this as somebody I don't really know you that well, just getting to know you now. I don't know if at some point between then and now there was an epiphany. There was the peak. Just from the little bit I know you and the conversations we've had, both at the last time you were here for the House Show and now for this podcast.
Yeah.
You seem like too much of a level-headed person to have let this deep-seated anxiety and depression destroy you. I think you were going to end up okay either way. And when I say okay, I mean functioning.
Right. Right.
I mean, honestly, you have such a firm grasp of reality and you have such a good head on your shoulders to understand that I feel like even if you didn't have that self-medication period, there would have been something else. Like I have faith in that you were going to be fine regardless. And I have faith you're going to be fine in the future as well. We have been talking well over the allotted time period, but I don't care. There's been such a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you coming back. I feel like there's still a lot more I really want to chat with you about. I'd love to talk to you. You are in a really fantastic relationship with your lovely wife.
Yep.
Who is great about letting you leave the house for weeks on end to tour.
Yep.
Who when you text her, "I miss you," she responds with, "The garbage needs to be taken out."
Yeah, exactly.
You told me earlier off mic, which I just totally blew up your spot. But I feel like there's plenty more conversation here.
Sure.
Will you please let me know next time you're in LA?
Yes, I will. I'd love to come back.
I absolutely have to do this. The other question I want to ask you is, for the listeners who now have gotten a little bit to know you, I would love for also them to experience some music. Would you be willing to let us play a track after this is over?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have an idea what track you might send me?
Oh man, that's a good question. Okay, well maybe because of just the context of everything we've been talking about. There's a song called Poison Oak.
Okay.
That normally wouldn't really get a lot of publicity of their places because in the chorus it says goddamn, so it's not really allowed on the radio and stuff like that, unfortunately.
Well,
which is really stupid.
Well, guess what? You can say goddamn as much as you want on this goddamn podcast.
Fuck yeah, I can. But it's like
so it's called Poison Oak?
It's called Poison Oak. And so just a little backstory. Where I grew up in Aromas, where our house was, like most of the property was just a big gully full of poison oak. And so this whole idea of poison oak is just sort of like a throwback to like how I grew up and all that good stuff. And the chorus just kind of comes back around to the same sort of existential thought and question where it just says like, God damn, I wish it all made sense. My existence, my ignorance, my past, my future. Just talking about like the moments when like your brain just sort of explodes with expansion and you're just like, I cannot handle this. This is way too much information being alive, you know? Well, so it just seems relevant.
That's fantastic. So what I love about that is it seems like your art therapy used to be little headstones, and now your art therapy is simply your music that you put out there. And I think that is absolutely incredible. So please stay tuned. After we wrap this up, there's going to be a slight commercial, and then you're going to hear Poison Oak by John Miller, a.k.a. The Holy Dark. How do people find you on the internet?
You can go to theholydarkband.com. You can also do basically on all social media, The Holy Dark Band. So at The Holy Dark Band / The Holy Dark Band, go nuts. You'll find it. It's right there.
Fantastic. As always, please find me on Twitter at Liquid Jake. On Instagram is just Jake Lloyd. It's Elaborate Pod on all social media, at Elaborate Pod on Instagram, Twitter, all the good stuff. So Elaborate is part of the Dragon Wagon Radio podcast network. You hear the stingers at the end of each episode every single week. You hear commercials for other show on the network. Dragon Wagon Radio is a completely independent collective of podcasts. But despite the fact that we're completely independent, we're dedicated to always be absolutely 100% free for you to listen to. But if you're feeling generous, and, it's the holidays, so why wouldn't you be? You can support this awesome indie network by checking out our Amazon wish list. Yes, Dragon Wagon Radio has an Amazon wish list. You can check it out, and you can gift something directly that's needed. There are items on the wish list, both big and small, from, TP and coffee to microphones and electronic gear. No matter what your budget for giving is, there's something there that you can gift us, and you can help out, and it will go a long way. So simply search for Dragon Wagon Radio wishlist on Amazon, or make it even super easy. Just go to www.dragonwagonradio.com/donate and spread some love. It is the absolute best way to support Dragon Wagon Radio and to support Elaborate, because we're all in this together. We're learning, we're growing, we're doing it together. As always, please follow It's Dragon Wagon on all social media for all things Dragon Wagon Radio. Thank you so much for coming, John. Please, listeners, stay tuned for Poison Oak. John, love you, buddy.
Love you too, bud. Thanks for having me.
You were engulfed by quite the flame, and since been restored but not the same. And I used to think that was imaginary. In light of the dark you carried, I found on my own you can't just be anyone free from disaster. In a gully overgrown, conquer, tried and true. I thought I was free, but found myself contemplating, returning but hesitating. I snuck to your house and placed my ear on your door, and I heard you praying. You said, God damn, I wish it all made sense. My existence, my ignorance, my past, my future, present tense has to end. Mama, I don't know who I am. Let's check my pulse and hold my hand. Let's take this boy and make a man. Make a
It's Dragon Wagon.